the state is making the case that having this information will help them bring more perpetrators to justice and prevent more things like this from happening. What is your response to that?
So, look, I think that the guiding principle that we have in this appeal is really simple, Emily. We want to protect the privacy of sexual assault survivors, and we want to protect their right to consent when, whether, and with whom sensitive data about them is shared. When you speak with anti-sexual violence advocates, they will tell you that best practice is not to make that decision for sexual assault survivors. Even when it comes to law enforcement, the best practice is to allow survivors to make that choice themselves. I would note, though, that we're not exactly sure why the CPUC is seeking this information. They've never asked for this kind of information before, personally identifying information about sexual assault survivors. And I think it's the extraordinary nature of this request is why it's not just Uber having a back and forth with its regulator. It's why so many other groups, anti-sexual violence groups like RAINN, like Time's Up, like Reliance, like No More, they've all weighed in opposing this order because of the damage that it can cause to survivors, and it's why we're appealing it.
Now, the state is arguing that if Uber doesn't do this, it poses a risk to its drivers and riders. And, it's hard to quite understand because doesn't both Uber and the state not want these kinds of incidents to happen? Aren't the goals the same?
The goals are absolutely the same. And I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. This is actually not the state, meaning like the state of California. This is a recommendation of one judge, an administrative law judge, that's associated with the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulator for all rideshare in California. So this is not like the district attorney. This is not like the attorney general's office, offices that are actually charged with investigating sexual assaults and sexual violence. This is a public utilities regulator that is seeking data. And to be clear, we give reams and reams of anonymized data to the CPUC every single year as part of our regulatory obligation. We don't have any argument with that. And in fact, even in this case, the administrative law judge said, listen, Uber, we want you to give us categories A, B, C, and D of information. We said, fine, we'll give you A, B, and C, but D is something you have never asked for before. It is personally identifying information of sexual assault survivors. So work with us so that we can give you the information you seek, but in a manner, in a way that protects their privacy rights. We've tried for the better part of a year to sit down with the CPUC. We've been asking them if they would be willing to sit down with groups like RAINN, groups like Time's Up, other advocacy and expert groups in how to deal with survivors and are informed in trauma-informed investigation. We've asked that they sit down with these groups and listen, just as we did before we produced our safety report, so that we can come to an agreement as to how we produce this information in a way that protects survivors. And that's really the end game here.
Well, and I know part of the concern is that, victims won't report some of these incidents if they believe that their information is not protected. What do you think the timeline is here? When do you expect this to reach some sort of resolution?
Well, we'd like to reach it sooner rather than later because, as you rightly point out, we actually have the same goal, which is we want to make rideshare as safe as possible. And so it's, again, this is not an argument about, whether or not we'll give the information. We respect the CPUC's role as a regulator. We respect their right to request information. We simply want to do it in a way that protects the privacy of survivors. And so, that is a conversation that we would very, very much welcome. And we'd like to have it as soon as possible. Hopefully, by filing this appeal, that will give us an avenue to begin to have a dialogue with anti-sexual violence experts and advocates and with Uber to try to get to resolution on this. But, there's one other thing I want to mention is that, the fine is astronomical. I mean, it's huge and nobody likes to pay a fine. No one likes to be fined. But the issue in this case that really concerns us is the message that it sends, because this all comes out of the voluntary safety report that Uber published in December of last year, and that was lauded at the time as a real step forward for corporate transparency. It was voluntary. There was no lawsuit or no law requiring us to do that. We did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. Now, if you're a company that's grappling with that same hard decision, and you're trying to decide whether or not to be transparent, and you see that the reward for being transparent is a $59 million fine, we think it sends a very chilling message.
Now, before you go, Tony, I have to ask you, given that we are at such an unprecedented moment in American history, you worked in the Department of Justice, nobody knows what the next few days before inauguration will bring. Presumably, we will have an administration changeover and hopefully a peaceful transition of power. How does an incoming Biden administration impact Uber's top priorities for the year?
Well, we're looking forward to working with the new administration on a whole host of issues as we try to help cities and help the country recover economically. We think we can be part of the solution when it comes to economic recovery. We think we can be part of the solution when it comes to health recovery. We just announced the other day a new partnership with Moderna, for instance, because we believe very, very strongly that transportation should not bar anyone from getting access to the vaccine. And so we want to help educate people about vaccine safety, but we also want to make sure that there are no underserved communities out there that aren't getting that access, which is why we've announced 10 million free and discounted rides to help ensure that the country gets vaccinated. We think there are those kinds of opportunities to work with the new administration as well as others.